Hey, I want to thank you all for coming. I only expected 4 people, so I'm quite surprised. Amazing. And I want to thank all my old friends and clients for coming. I don't see you enough. New people that have never been here. Honored guests. My friend Solomon Grimberg, who I have not seen in a long time. And John Albok's great-grandson, Josh Civic, and his girlfriend, Kara, are here. So he lived, I can't say he lived through it. He was a little kid when I first met him. And, you know, I always like to start out with a little reality check for myself. I ask myself 4 questions. Who am I? I can answer that one. Although I'm 74, sometimes I can't. Today I can. I'm Burt Finger, Gallery Director of Photographs PDNB Gallery. We've been here for 21 years. We are honored and privileged to own a gallery and be able to have people like you come and visit us and share your life with us. Why am I here? I'm here because I love photography, I love art, and I have something to say today. Something what I think is very important to me. Where did I come from? I came from these pictures. I was born in New York in 1943. Many of these photographs are from 1943, or the 40s or the 30s. They're so near and dear to my heart. Every time I look at these things, I see my childhood. I see people that I think I knew. I see my mother and father. I see myself guarding a baseball bat. And I'd kind of like to know why you're here, but I guess it's to learn something about John Albok, his wonderful photographs, and how they came to be. How they came to be. I guess about 18 years ago, I was in a gallery and met this beautiful woman. Her name was Albok. I may get teary-eyed because this whole thing is so close to my life. If there was one thing that I would want to speak about, it would be this. Alona was a very elegant woman. She was lived in New York most of her life. She moved to Dallas to be with her daughter and grandson. In her earlier life, she was an opera singer. When I was with her sometimes, she would be showing me photographs and all of a sudden break into an aria and be singing. What the hell is going on? I mean, she always, you never knew what she would do. She was very unpredictable. She could be the most loving person in the world, and sometimes she was on my case, like, I don't even want to talk about it. She was a friend, she was a mother, she was a grandmother. She was my conduit to my old life in New York. She cooked like my grandmother and my mother. I would go to her house and she would make stuffed cabbage, palacintas, all the great Hungarian dishes. Oh, part of my family is Hungarian. That was another connection. She would make stuff that I didn't have for so many years. So it was great to be with her. And then we would look through, she would pull out boxes of photographs, we would look through the photographs. And she would usually reprimand me and say, "You're not handling them properly. You're looking too fast." I mean, you know, she always was kind of needling me, but she was very generous. If I was, well, she decided to let me represent the archive, and I've done so for probably 18 years. You know, I would call her up and say, we'll go visit her and say, "Alona, I'm doing a show. It's not just about John Albok, but it's about shoeshine boards. And I know Mr. Albok has pictures of shoeshine boards." Well, she'd call me at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. She'd say, "Burt, I found another one." You know, she loved being part of that whole thing. And she was very generous. She was also an animal lover. Loved cats. She had maybe 4 or 5 cats in the house and probably 16 cats outside. And she took care of these cats. I mean, she would take them to the vet. Her vet bills were enormous. And she would say to me, "Burt, you have to buy a photograph today. I need to pay my vet bill." One day she said to me, "Burt, you have to buy a photograph. The veterinarian's assistant needs money to buy a car, and I'm going to give her $1,000. And that was alone that she was always generous to a fault. Anyway, that's how I got to be the representative of the Albok estate. And now the estate is in Josh's hands, and I'm sure we'll work together promoting John Albok's work. John Albok was an interesting man. He was born in 1894 in Munkacs, Hungary. But now, Robert, what is it now?
Part of the Ukraine.
You got to speak up.
Part of the Ukraine.
It's now part of the Ukraine. He had no formal education. At the age of 12, he scrimped up enough money to buy a little brownie camera and fell in love with photography. The next year, he was apprenticed to a tailor, where he learned the trade of tailoring. In 1917, he was inducted into the Hungarian army, and his job was prison guard. So he had to guard these Russian prisoners. And all during that time, he had his little brownie camera. He was taking pictures of events that were going on in the prison camp. Unfortunately, only one photograph survived from his life as a prison guard. And it's a marvelous photograph of a group of naked Russian prisoners standing around a stove trying to heat themselves after they've been sprayed with delousing agent. And to Ilona, she thought this was probably the most valuable photograph in the whole wide world. It's a great photograph, but I think there's even better ones in the archive, and some of them are on the wall. He was, as I said, he was extremely poor. In fact, I think it was about 1917 or 18, 2 of his sisters died of starvation. And there were other terrible things that poverty caused that happened in his life. In 1921, he decided he was going to go to the United States. And this was a bold move. So with his box camera that he bought, his violin, he was also a musician, and a pair of tailor shears, he boarded a transport ship and came to the United States. On the way over here, he did pictures of passengers and made some money. He was a very, very ingenious man. I mean, he was always able to sustain himself. So when he got to the United States, he went to work for other tailors in New York. He lived in New York City. And in 1923, he opened up his own tailor shop on 97th Street and Madison Avenue. Now, when I say tailor, he didn't just repair clothes. He was a master tailor. And if you look at this picture here, here's one of his sport coats that he did. But he would build women's clothing, suits, skirts. And I've seen a picture of, like, I don't know if you're fashion people, but this beautiful men's vicuna overcoat. It's kind of a camel hair coat that has a sash. A lot of the gangsters used to wear them. Very expensive and very beautiful. So he worked in his tailor shop. He became very successful. All along, he would photograph. He would work from 5 o'clock in the morning. He would get up, have breakfast. 7 o'clock, he was in the tailor shop. 12 o'clock, his wife Ilona. And this is, there were 2 Ilonas. The mother and the daughter had the same name. His wife Ilona would bring him lunch, have lunch, work till 5 o'clock, have dinner. At 7 o'clock, he would be in his darkroom. On the weekends, he was out on the street photographing. His haunts were outside of his tailor shop. Many of the pictures are outside his tailor shop. From his balcony, some of the pictures you'll see are from his balcony, taking pictures at night of the traffic, the snow, but mainly of the people in New York and Central Park. In the 1930s, the Depression hit. Who needed their clothes cleaned? They had big holes in their clothes. So he was forced to close his tailor shop. And at this time, being the ingenious man that he was, he opened a portrait studio in his apartment. And he was able to make a living doing portraits. And he did this for several years until the Depression was over, and he was able to reopen his tailor shop. Now, this is already 1940, and he's getting acclaim as a photographer. He's entering these photo contests put on by the newspaper, the Herald Tribune. He wins 13 first prizes for his photography. And he's getting more and more acclaim. And then in 1938, he has his first major show at the Museum of the City of New York. And this was a big deal for him. He did a talk at Rockefeller Center Camera Club, and it's in one of those books. He talks about art, photography, and where he fits in. And he really had a great understanding of the art of photography. When you look at these pictures, you'll see pictures that are very European looking. They're taken from different angles, bird's eye view, taken from the ground up. They're very, very personal pictures of children. You can tell he had a love for children. They're marvelous street portraits of sometimes underprivileged children. And he just had a knack for being compassionate and feeling in his photography. He was a beautiful man. He used to say that he was a socialist, but I think in today's day and age we would probably call him a fairly liberal Democrat. He had high regard for Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor. I mean, he thought that these were the people that could do no wrong, and he was very proud to be an American. He loved the United States of America. Now, his Depression pictures are probably some of the most important. He has 28 pictures in the Getty Museum. He has pictures in MoMA, the museum in Houston, the Dallas Museum. Many major museums own his photographs. But his Depression pictures were probably his most sought after. And one of the reasons, and if you look at them, he was a very sympathetic man. He photographed these people with a huge amount of dignity. I mean, he never really, he didn't make fun of them, he didn't use them. He photographed them as he would an elegant person on Park Avenue. And there are two documentaries on his life. One was done by a Swedish film group, and the other we're showing at 2 o'clock. And it was done by Gordon Hyatt and was nominated for an Emmy Award. It's a wonderful film. Hope you can stay for it. Anyway, do you have any questions? Yes?
Were you familiar with his work before you met Alon?
What?
Were you familiar with his work before you met Mr. Block?
No. No, I wasn't. Oh, another thing that I failed to tell you is in 1982, he had his second major retrospective at the Museum of the City in New York. At this time, he was very ill, and he was in Roosevelt Hospital, which is only about 3 blocks from the museum. So they had made preparations to take him from the hospital to the opening of his show. He was so proud that he was having this major retrospective. And a day before it opened, he passed on, which was one of those weird things. Anyway, I hope you had a chance to look at some of these photographs. This one is of particular interest because it shows his craft.
Here's a question.
Did he have a following? Was he able to sell his photographs while he was doing his lifetime?
Yes, he used his tailor shop as a gallery. So if you walk by his tailor shop, you would see photographs in the window. People would come in. A lot of doctors and nurses on their way to Roosevelt Hospital would stop by and buy photographs with him. But then, you know, a photograph was $50, $100, $20. He did make a living selling his photographs, but he enjoyed people enjoying his work. And if you look at this particular photograph, there's a photograph of Mr. Albok. He's got his Rolleiflex, and it's a self-portrait. It has this magnificent sport coat. I wish I owned it. It's just really beautiful. And then in the background are a bunch of his photographs hung in the tailor shop.
It's a fascinating photograph.
Yeah.
It's a self-portrait, almost.
Yeah, it's really, I wonder if that's his coat. This particular photograph was taken from his upstairs apartment. His tailor shop was on the ground floor, and then his apartment was upstairs, so he could get out on his fire escape and take pictures. And he did this repeatedly. You see several dozen pictures of Hanscom. When it snowed, it was beautiful. The lighting on the street was magnificent. A lot of times there were huge traffic jams, so he was always there and always available. I remember being a kid in New York, in the Lower East Side, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. We didn't have swimming pools, so one of the older guys would get a wrench and they would open up the fire hydrant, and we would, like, you know, spend a little while in the fire hydrant until the police came and chased us down the street. We would run like hell. So to me, I'm reliving an old part of my life. And this is a scene you used to see in New York. I don't think you do anymore. Clothes hanging on a clothesline. In fact, they did a show called Clotheslines. And I had clotheslines from many, many different photographers, a lot from Alona. You know, she'd call me, yeah, I found another clothesline picture. And they were great. I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful picture. And it's really New York in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is a particular, I don't know why I'm so attracted to this picture. It's really a picture of not much. But it's two people standing and talking, and you can tell they don't know there's a photographer there. They're just acting very natural. This one car is moving, and the composition is just very pleasing. I can almost hear them talking to each other, and I think they're talking in Italian. 97th and Madison was on the cusp of Spanish Harlem. So if you look at these kids, they look like they could be Hispanic. They're dressed in their wonderful cowboy attire. I wish I'd had that when I was a kid, but I was probably as poor as they were. Although they look pretty rich. They look damn happy. But it's a wonderful picture of three cowboys. He loved animals. He loved plants. He would take these marvelous pictures of dogs that were parked outside of his shop. When he saw them, he would walk outside and take a picture. His titles were generally very unusual. This particular photograph is called Joyriders. And I have another one of a dog in a chauffeur-driven car that is just magnificent. Central Park, three soldiers on leave, probably World War II. A self-portrait by John Albok, always had a nice cropped head of hair. This is a picture of my past. I don't know if you ever go to New York in the winter time, and there's a man pushing this little buggy that is heated with a smokestack. I remember another picture of that. And in that little box, he's heating chestnuts And he rolls up a piece of paper in a cone and puts these chestnuts in the cone, and there's probably a nickel for a bag full of chestnuts. But in the wintertime, they were warm, and they would keep you warm. And it's a wonderful memory. They smell great. Depression picture. This is an interesting picture. Alona had a great story about this, and it may even be in the films. This man is on the corner right near his shop, selling pencils. He's blind. A few days later, Mr. Albok is going to catch a train, and there's this man, not blind, just walking around. And he says to the man, "How could you fool these people to think that you were blind?" And the man says, "I have to make a living." And it was during the Depression, so I thought that was an interesting story. I have to make a living. Oh, here's the chestnut machine. Anyway, if you have some questions, I hope I can answer them. If you don't have any questions, let's have a drink.
Do you have a favorite bird?
Do I have a favorite? I have a lot of favorites. You know, I don't know why. I love that dog picture. It just, you know, it makes me laugh. The picture to the left of it is called Fruit Faces, and it's Halloween, and that's Solitano's grocery store. It's right next door to John Albok's tailor shop, and it's not, I guess I like some of the pictures that make me laugh. Some of the pictures are really hard to look at. There's a lot of pictures of poverty, of people digging in garbage, of what was the name of the president during the Depression? Hooverville, which was tent city set up in Central Park. I mean, there's a lot of depressing pictures that really make you think about life in the 30s and what it is to be poor. But then there's a lot of joyful pictures. One of the things about the estate that really complicates things is that he was really good at a lot of things. I mean, he was a documentary photographer. He liked to be thought of as a historian. He was a street photographer. He was a portrait photographer. He did it all so well. So it's hard to categorize him. Like many photographers do one thing and they do it well. He did a lot of things and he did it very well. And it confuses curators because there's so many different things to look at. One of his good friends, one of his friends was also a Hungarian who got a lot of success. His name was Andrei Kurtage. And you know, they had a lot of dialogue, and Alona told me that Kurtage, he was allergic to the chemistry, so he never really could do his own printing. But he came to the United States and worked commercially for magazines and advertising, and he was always in awe of John Albok because John never worked for anybody. He was a tailor and he did whatever he wanted to do in the medium of photography. He was totally unrestricted and unrestrained. And you see that in his photographs. I mean, this is a photograph I forgot to show you. This is Alona Albok. I guess she must have been 10 or 12 then. And that was a photograph of the Heckscher Foundation. It was a foundation that they provided activities for, I guess, not necessarily underprivileged people, but people that lived in New York and weren't wealthy enough to afford to go out to the country and do whatever. Don't escape, Solomon. Okay.
I have two photographs by Albok that you showed me. One of them.
Got her.
Yeah, which I wouldn't trade for anything. But one of them, I think you told me, is a tailor, but I don't think it's a self-portrait. I just wondered if you recall the photograph.
No,
is
but
it a friend of his?
I'll look it up.
It's a
No.
very sweet face. He has a mustache. I think he's holding a pipe.
Oh, yeah, no, that's the tinker.
Oh, Tinker. Not
Yeah, he's the tinker.
Taylor.
This is a man that goes around fixing things.
Okay.
Yeah, and that, he is repeatedly shown in photographs
Okay.
by John. That's a very charming photograph.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
That's attesting to how wonderful they hang in your home and make you feel good. That's another. Being a photography dealer, I have to say it's been a privilege to have clients like Ellen and other clients that are here. I don't want to mention who they are, but it has given Missy and I a privilege of putting things in their home that add joy, love. A lot of my clients, when they first came here, they didn't have children. Then they started having children, and their children would come to the gallery. Their children would grow up in my gallery. In fact, one of them, I'm the godfather of one of the children. You know, and they're comfortable in a gallery. They've learned so much, and they love art. And I'll tell you a quick story that I told today to somebody. Many years ago, Missy and I were in Italy visiting friends, Gianni and Antonella. And we were drinking and sitting around. And Johnny was kind of crying. I said, Johnny, what's wrong? He said, I just feel bad for some of my friends. I said, somebody sick or what? He said, no. He said, they just don't understand. They don't understand the beauty. They don't understand art. I said, why the hell are you crying, though? He said, I just feel bad. They're my friends. I said, okay. You know, and like 20 years later, I kind of understood what he was saying after having a gallery. Because you get people in here that say, oh, come on, Emperor's New Clothes. $50,000 for a photograph, are you out of your mind? You know, they see it in dollars and cents and don't see the beauty of it. And it makes me want to cry because I can't do anything about it. And I've almost come to the point after 20 years I've stopped trying. I mean, you can't force people to love something that they can't see. I have a feeling, because you're here, somehow you have the gift of seeing. And it's such a very special gift.
Well, you've given us a gift in helping us see.
Well, I wish I could do more. Any more questions?
How many photographs in the collection in the archives?
In the archive?
You have any?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you. I may have 200. There's probably, I don't know, how many photographs? A lot.
3,500?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But you know, when I go through photographs, I classify it A, B, C, D. So to me, it's more important that you have the A's and B's, the C's, D's, and E's. Or, you know, that's the important thing. Not necessarily the number, but the number that are. You know, and I want to thank Josh, because Josh loaned me some photographs for this show, and they're really important ones. Ones that Alona didn't loan me. I was with
I might be more generous than her.
I was with Alona on the. She was such a great lady. The only time I saw her without makeup was when she was in the hospital. And I'd known her for years. I'd come over to the house, she was like perfectly dressed, the hat sometimes, no glove. I mean, she's perfect. Lipstick, everything. You know, it's like, and I looked like a bum. But in the hospital, you know, I'd go in and God, she looked great. She was happy. She'd been, you know, she just sounded good. I don't know what it was. And I was there with John Rohrbach from Naaman Carter. She loved John as well. So I looked down at her and she talking. I think, ah, God, things are going to be okay. You know, she's looking good. She calls me over. I bend down, she's talking real softly. She looks at me and she says, Burt, things are going to be okay. What? Okay. I said, thank you, Lorna. And then she passed away a little while after that. So, you know, she told me things are going to be okay, and I believe her. So things are going to be okay. So thank you for coming. If I can address any questions in private, I'll be glad to.
One more question. Did he have any inspiration from other photographers from the period?
Did he?
Uh-huh.
I think every photographer has inspiration. You can look at his work and you can see inspiration from the Bauhaus. You know, when you look at some of those angles that he photographs from, that's pure Bauhaus. I think that was his biggest influence, Bauhaus. That's a good question. I always think of him influencing other people, but of course it went the other way as well.
I have a question, Burt. Over here, the candidates, like, did he speak with his...
The what?
The candidates of the street scenes?
Yeah.
Did he interact with the subjects?
Yeah, I think he did. I mean, I can't be for sure, but you could see, you know, especially the children, they're having kind of an interaction. Another thing he did was he was a cinematographer. He made several films, of which we probably need to have restored, but it kind of takes, we're talking 16 millimeter films, and it takes a huge amount of money to get them restored. But maybe one day we will. Anyway, we press on with the archive. Today, Dallas, next week, the world. Okay. Thank you again. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I can't believe it.